tripod frame?
Because
than
it's, those wheels are really expensive.
The ones that are on the pin?
Yeah, the like the brass ones, those are really expensive. And
Okay, so
I
these are
think-
cheaper wheels?
I think so.
Okay. Because I couldn't see from the movement standpoint.
This is never,
Right, no,
it's
no,
just
no,
one
yeah.
of five
I mean,
of these videos.
you need,
You know,
they originally come in like penny wheels, they're
Just-
and that's why they're, and also it's hard.
Frank's got his road on.
Valley's just basically.
Well, I sent them flowers, which they did try to get
Yeah.
flowers.
Yeah.
But
Correct.
yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm Nick Norwood. I'm the director of the Carson McCullers Center for Writers and Musicians. And we are really happy to see you here tonight for this performance of the David Diamond Reading and Recital Series. Named in honor of Carson McCullers' close friend, world-renowned composer David Diamond. The David Diamond Reading and Recital Series pairs a Columbus State University creative writing student with a soloist or a small ensemble from the Schwab School of Music for a reading of original work by the writer and a performance of repertorial pieces by the musicians. 4 public performances are scheduled throughout the academic year, 2 in the fall, 2 in the spring. This is the first one of fall 2025. So again, thanks so much for coming. We're really happy you're here. I should remind everyone to please set your devices to stun. Tonight's performers are Caleb Ferreira on piano and Sal Wessner on prose. I'm going to let them introduce their own pieces. So again, thank you very much for coming.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Caleb. I'm a master's student here at the School of Music. When I was asked to do this, I was very glad to have the opportunity. There's something whenever a pianist or another musician is learning a piece that is, I guess, very literature adjacent. There's a very imaginative process that we go through every time we delve into a piece. For a lot of musicians, having a narrative is a really important part of performing. If you can think of a story that goes along with the music, it oftentimes adds a lot of life and interest and color into the playing itself. And that can vary the kinds of narratives that we musicians come up with. Oftentimes, it's like, oh, there's this big romance, maybe it's lovers, or maybe there's this dark tragedy that happened. For this first piece that I'm playing for you, I have a very specific image in my mind. Of course, this might differ for you listeners, but for me, this piece by Prokofiev, this is his 9th piano sonata, specifically the first movement. It's totally sci-fi. I see space and stars and a very specific image of space brimming with life and lots of interest. You can feel kind of a weightlessness within the music. And actually there's a quote from C.S. Lewis from his space trilogy, Out of the Silent Planet, that I think describes this piece very well to me. So on space. He had read of space. At the back of his thinking for years had lurked the dismal fancy of the black cold vacuity, the utter deadness which was supposed to separate the worlds. He had not known how much it affected him till now that the very name space seemed a blasphemous libel for this empyrean ocean of radiance in which they swam. He could not call it dead. He felt life pouring into him from it every moment. How indeed should it be otherwise, since out of this ocean all the worlds and all their life had come? He had thought it barren. He now saw that it was the womb of worlds, whose blazing and innumerable offspring looked down nightly even upon the earth with so many eyes, and here, with how many more? No, space was the wrong name. Please enjoy.
much for coming out, and thank you to the Carson McCullers Centers and all of the people who do the work to make that institution and this event happen. I'm very glad to be able to read for you all tonight. My name is Sal Wessner. I am a senior interdisciplinary studies student here at CSU. So the author, Catherine M. Valentine, coined the term myth punk. This basically refers to a genre of fiction that incorporates elements of fairy tale, folklore, and, like the name says, myth. It's often through a lens of social or political commentary, reimagining the old in a way that fits the new. Now, I'm not necessarily sure that any genres are real, but if they were, I think that this story would fit into that of myth punk. I wrote this during a time when I was studying Napoleonic France, and I became enamored by this slice of the past. In particular, while I was writing this, I was thinking a lot about power dynamics, privilege, and death. So, thank you for coming. I hope that you enjoy. This is La Fouché. This is how it began. Soleil drew her first breath from her mother's last exhale. She then lay silent on the cooling chest, as if born knowing how to mourn. The girl moved through life with a back always tense and eyes always moving, a disposition that came with seeing the undead. Pale faces pressed against windows, shadows that rotted and reached. Soleil learned not to speak of those things. In her 17th year, the emperor summoned her father to fight in his grand army. Soleil had no place in the village without him, and he had but one thing to leave her, his saber briquet, the sword of revolution. She would sell it in the capital, where her tante, Eloise, lived. With little fanfare, she wrapped the sword in linen and left the place where only the dead would miss her. They called the capital the City of Light. Soleil hated it. She hated the streets where excrement coated her shoes and followed her with leering eyes, the officers who harassed her for papers she did not need, the noise that made her head throb, the rotten smell that clung to her hair, so terrible she had to shear it off. More than anything, though, she hated the dead. In the village, spirits were scarce, spread out on the rolling plains. Here, the dead cluttered and choked her, standing shoulder to shoulder on the streets, an endless exhumation. Eloise's apartment was full of children, and her husband kept her swollen with more to come. The revolution had gifted Pierre Lepage with a chest wound that never healed. Occasionally, it burst open, spewing pus as foul as the man himself. He would corner Soleil, whispering with breath that stunk worse than any death. She was desperate for work, not even able to sell her father's saber, the model too common, a marchand told her, worth more turned to scrap. At night, she gripped the sword until her fingers went numb. It had been weeks of closed doors and open taunts when Soleil remembered her first dream. The girl stood alone on a vast plain of pitch. Her hair was long and cool on her neck. She had missed the feeling. A horned owl circled overhead, then swooped. It ripped a chunk of curls from her scalp, then flew over a black ocean, landing on a white pillar. Soleil chased it, feet bare against the umbral waves. When she reached the owl on the pillar, its wings were broken, her stolen lock caught in its beak. Crossing the river for a dream was foolish. Soleil knew to keep from the wealthy arrondissements, but it took just a few steps on the clean cobble street when she saw it. A manor stood in a grand garden, held up by white marble and a facade of gilded shells and golden birds. She told the porter she was there for an interview. Somehow, he allowed her inside. She was sat in an immense interior chamber. The windows welcomed sunlight, bright through crystal chandeliers scattering on a lacquered floor. Oil paintings glared at her, then footsteps. The first figure to appear was a woman in a maid's dress. Her hair gleamed a fine silver, and her skin was dark like Soleil's, though lined with age. She remained standing while the second woman sat. No introduction needed. This was the lady of the manor. She had round, attractive features, pale and pink. A simple cream gown hung from her healthy frame. The lady looked her over with pale blue eyes. "Stand up," she commanded. Soleil suddenly went cold, and she could not suppress a shudder, but the lady raised an eyebrow, and the girl did as she said. "Turn around." Soleil hesitated again, but the thought of dead-filled streets forced her to comply. "Now, smile." Soleil bared her teeth. The lady was satisfied and gestured for her to sit. Soleil did not know where to keep anger, so instead she willed it away. The lady continued speaking. "Laziness will not be tolerated. You will follow every instruction with pleasure. Leandre," she gestured towards the old woman, "has been with my estate since my birth. We value loyalty. Do you understand this?" Soleil considered the words, weighed them against the city she hated and the village she could not return to, a mother unknown and a father lost. "Yes, madame," she said, "I understand." Soleil only returned to Eloise's for the saber. There was no need to pretend they would miss each other, and she did not have to wish Pierre Lepage goodbye. Earlier that week, he had become bedridden. His wound crusted and oozed under a black scab, while his limbs swelled like an overstuffed sausage. He would die soon. Soleil was glad for it. Leandre explained her duties as the lady's personal attendant. The girl prepared herself for unpleasantness, but none came. The lady was mild in her private chamber, happy to speak, and Soleil was glad not to. The house held no spirits, a needed reprieve from the city, yet, though she saw nothing, in the quiet hours of the night, she could not ignore what she felt, the creeping chill of death. Soleil's work was easy and boring. She ate with Leandre, though even raising a spoon seemed to exhaust the poor woman. She tried to befriend the other maids, a useless endeavor. When she entered a room, conversation would cease, though she managed to catch some words of gossip. The lord of the manor was kept busy with important duties and many affairs. Supposedly, the couple had 3 daughters, all of whom had married well and moved far away. Soleil was surprised to hear that. The lady never spoke of her children. One day, when she was feeling particularly bored, and thus particularly brave, she asked her employer a question that haunted her. "Madame, I have an inquiry." The lady bid her to continue. "I have heard it said that we killed all nobles after the revolution, but you are still here." The lady looked at the girl. For the first time, the chamber was silent. Then she began to laugh. It was a terrible sound that made the air in Soleil's lungs freeze. Just when she thought she would die, the lady stopped. "We will not speak of this," she ordered, and it was so. Soleil spent a long time lying awake that night. She thought of the lady and the saber under her bed. Eventually, she drifted to sleep. It was then she remembered the second dream. She sat in a moonlit field, dining with a beautiful woman whose black hair bled into the night sky. Their plates were stacked with raw meat. Soleil scooped a fistful of flesh. It squirmed between her fingers. The woman sighed as she raised it to her lips. The Lord's return loomed over them. 3 times a missive appeared announcing his arrival, and 3 times no one came. Soleil was leaving the lady's chambers when she saw it, a man by the window. The moon passed through the clouds, and light shined on his empty sockets, of its eyes and skin hanging off its jaws. She was surprised to see a spirit in the house. So she tried to hurry past the window. It lunged for her, hands connecting with her skin, rotting and real. She tried to pull away, but it fell to the floor, trapping her underneath its heavy, wet flesh. It ripped at her chest and face, and she screamed. Then more hands were on her. She fought harder before recognizing a kitchen boy and going limp in his arms. More manservants grabbed the putrid thing, dragging it into a room she had never seen open. Inside, it was cluttered with furniture, fineries, the rungs of a ladder. The lady was quick to see Soleil. "My father is very sick," she said with a heavy voice. "Madame, there is something terribly wrong." The lady's pretty features twisted. "We will not speak of this again," she said. And it was so. Winter deepened, and the manor grew colder. Soleil chased something in her empty obsidian dreams, but when she woke, she could not recall what made her run. The Lord's return was certain this time. Soleil convinced Leandre to let her do the market trip. She truly did not think the old woman would survive the journey, and the girl needed an escape from the manor. Every shadow scared her, and the maid's whispering had grown unbearable. The chaos of the city would be a relief, yet, when she arrived, it was all still. Vendors spoke in hushed tones, wives clung to their husbands, no children played. Even the spirits were different, standing frozen with glassy eyes. Then she saw him. Pierre Lepage. He looked worse than he did on his deathbed. He looked like he should be dead. Instead, he was lifting a crate. How he was standing, she did not know. Then the box fell and his arms followed. A terrible crack filled the air, and he stood there dumbly, bones jutting through his elbows, forearms swaying in the wind. After a moment, 2 officers grabbed him. The bloody tendon holding his left arm snapped and hit the ground in a wet crunch. The crowd did not respond. Soleil looked around and realized she could not separate the living from the dead. Her chest thrummed violently as she ran. Specters reached out and she recoiled, not knowing what could touch her. She stopped in the middle of the river's bridge, 2 halves of the lamplit city between her, each street full of bodies. Night had settled in the garden of the manor. The lady was outside. Leandre stood behind her. "Madame, the city," a pale hand raised to silence her. "Come inside," the lady said. Soleil followed. They were alone in the grand interior chamber, once more sat across from each other. Soleil could not stop shivering. "Do you know the contents of the Code Civil?" the lady asked. Soleil blinked. "It is the law of our empire, writ by our emperor himself." Her tone was that of a patient teacher. "Of concern to us is its section on inheritance and marriage." Soleil could no longer be silent. "Of concern to us is the dead in the streets." The lady clicked her tongue in irritation. "On the subject of death, the code states that when a man passes, his sons and daughters may inherit his capital. This estate, the manor, and its wealth are mine by rights. However, once a woman marries, her property falls under her husband's management. So, I must divorce. Yet, I cannot without proper cause. Another stipulation in the code. A man's affairs only matter if they occur within the family house." Soleil cared not for laws, but she knew more of death than any. She thought of the lady's corpse of a father, the decayed shell of Pierre. "What have you done to us?" she said. The lady ignored her words. "Here is what will happen. You will attend to my husband. She waved a hand, cutting through air. I will have proper cause, and perhaps you will have a marriage. Now, we will not speak of this again. More servants were in the room. Their hands moved Soleil without a choice. They put her in a bedchamber and locked the door. She was alone with pounding thoughts. The curse over the city, the halting of death and perversion of order, this was the lady's doing. The city would not be free from their corpses until her inheritance was secured. Soleil's mind scraped every possibility. What if she did what the lady demanded? She had learned to live with so much already. Why not this? Bile rose in her throat. No, she thought, not this. Let the dead tear me apart. Let them kill me 1,000 times, but I will not accept this. She clawed at the floors, the windows, and the door until her nails went back, bloody and broken. Soleil collapsed. Then she remembered the third dream. She was buried deep in the earth. She could not move, could not breathe. Then a pair of bone-white hands broke through the dirt. She reached towards them, and they reached back, pulling her from the ground over the city, the glittering lamps retreating stars beneath her feet as she ascended into the infinite abyss above. She woke to the sound of a door opening. Her heart seized, but it was only Leandre. She wanted to scream at her, but she looked so tired. Leandre raised a frail finger to her lips, then shut the door. I wished for release, for an end, the old woman said, but this is not right. Leandre embraced Soleil. She did not feel her heart beat. Leandre placed a pack into her hands. Leave here. Soleil looked up. She thought of feathers and blood. She drew her saber from the pack. I must find something. The young woman moved silently through the manor. She knew its cracks and creaks, the shadows and hidden places. She made it unseen to the hallway, to the door kept closed. She passed through the chamber where the not-dead father lay, flesh melted onto silken sheets, throat gurgling useless breath. She passed the pieces of fine furniture, the wall of medals and ceremonial swords. The ladder was at the back of the room. She began to climb. Soleil pulled herself up. Her feet found footing, and her eyes adjusted to the gloom. It was an abandoned aviary. The walls were lined with silver cages, rusted and empty. Then, in the middle of it all, a corpse. It opened its eyes and looked at her. Soleil did not startle. She recognized it. The corpse wore a black gown. Skeletal arms and legs peeked through the gossamer cloth. Its chest was covered with coal gray skin, and the same stretched over its face, that of a starved woman. Its hair flowed to the floor like a dark river. There were no whites in its eyes, instead black pupils drowning in pools of red. Tenebrous wings sprouted from its back, but it could not move, each extremity wrapped tight with ribbons, a grotesque gift, mortality bound. I thought I dreamed you, the corpse creature whispered. You were the dream, Soleil exclaimed. They looked at each other, eyes matched in wonder. Movement sounded from below, and the creature tilted its head. Will you free me? It asked. The lady rose into the chamber. She shouted something, words Soleil did not have to hear. Soleil took her saber and plunged it deep into the lady's stomach. But she could not die. So Soleil continued slashing until her body was quartered. She placed the writhing pieces of the lady in front of the creature, who opened its mouth and began to feast. Soon she was nothing but blood. The creature spread its wings, ripping the ribbons apart. It made a noise, a laugh, she realized, then raised a skeletal hand out to her. It smiled. Soleil smiled back. Together they stood, free and lovely in the black night. Thank you.
The second piece I have for you tonight is actually a second movement from one of Beethoven's piano sonatas. That's number 7 in D major, opus 10 number 3. Beethoven doesn't often write words within the titles of his pieces that denote the character, but this one is marked largo e mesto, which essentially means slow and sad, or mournful. Please enjoy.
Again, thank you so much for coming. The next David Diamond Reading and Recital event will be in this space on Wednesday, October 29th. Evie Fletcher will be reading with a small ensemble from the Shrubs. So we hope you'll come back for that as well. Thanks so much.